I thought the Sunday family meeting would be an ordinary one. But the moment I sat down, my younger son slid a thick stack of papers across the table toward me and said, smiling, "Dad, all you have to do is sign right here. We'll handle everything else. You don't have to think about it anymore." My older son nodded along. "You're 76, Dad. Let us carry the numbers for you. You just focus on living comfortably." I picked up the pen. I was about to sign. Then I stopped, and I asked one simple question. That question saved me. "I'm grateful you're here with me today." Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your city, your country. I'd love to know. Welcome back to the channel. A quick note before we continue. This story contains fictional elements woven in for the sake of storytelling and reflection. Names and places are coincidental, but the lesson underneath it is real. I've only had my hands on that particular engine twice in my life, and both times I remember exactly how it sounded before I opened the hood. I thought the Sunday family meeting would be an ordinary one, but the moment I sat down, my younger son slid a thick stack of papers toward me and said, "Dad, all you have to do is sign right here." My older son nodded. "You're 76, Dad. Let us carry the numbers." I picked up the pen. Then I asked a question. That question saved me. There are 3 afternoons I remember more clearly than any others in my life. The first was the day Ruth said yes. She was standing in the shop parking lot, hands still smelling faintly of motor oil, because I'd just shown her how to change a spark plug, and when I opened the ring box, she laughed before she cried, the way only Ruth ever managed to do both at once. The second was the afternoon I signed over Harold's auto to my 2 sons. 41 years of grease under my fingernails, and the particular ache in your shoulders that comes from leaning over an engine bay too many thousands of times, exchanged for a signature and a spoken promise that I'd always have a place in the small house behind the shop. The third was the afternoon my younger son laid a folder in front of me and called it the Grant Family Legacy Trust. That Sunday, the whole family had gathered in Danny's living room. Danny is my oldest, steady hands, quiet voice, the kind of man who learned to read a torque wrench before he learned to ride a bike. Marcus, my younger boy, sat beside him, more talkative, quicker with a smile, the one who used to climb into the truck cab with me on Saturday mornings and think a parts run was the greatest adventure a boy could ask for. Their wives, Patty and Lauren, sat a little behind them, the way people sit when they already know how a conversation is going to go and are simply there to witness it. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular warmth that takes practice to sound natural. "We've been thinking a lot about this. Given your age, given your health, we think it's time to put a solid financial structure in place to protect you, to protect the whole family." Danny slid the folder another few inches closer to me. "It's really just paperwork, Dad. The lawyer already drew it all up. You just have to sign." I looked down at the folder without opening it yet. The cover page read, in clean typeface, "The Grant Family Legacy Trust, prepared for Harold Edward Grant." I rested my palm flat on top of it, the same way I used to rest my palm flat on a blueprint before I let myself start reading the fine print, and I asked the question that 41 years of fixing other people's cars had taught me to always ask before signing anything at all. Who's managing this trust? The room went quiet for exactly half a second, long enough that I noticed it. "Us," Danny said. "Obviously, Dad. Who else would it be?" I closed the folder and set the pen back down on the table. "Let me read through it properly first," I said, keeping my voice as easy as if we were talking about the weather. Patty laughed, a laugh with rehearsal behind it. "Dad, you don't need to make it complicated. We already had everything checked." "I know," I said, "but I'm the one signing it, not you." I carried the folder home with me that night, without a single signature on it. Driving the old pickup back to the small house behind the shop, I felt something cold move down my spine. The same feeling I used to get when a customer brought a car in and said, "Just needs an oil change," while the engine was clearly telling a different story underneath the hood. I didn't sleep well that night, and by the time I sat down at my kitchen table the next morning with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand, I already knew I wasn't going to let that folder sit closed for long. I woke up at 5, the way I have every morning for as long as I can remember. Ruth used to call me part rooster. She'd pull the pillow over her face and groan when she heard me moving around the kitchen, and I'd bring her coffee in bed as a peace offering, and she'd sit up and take it with both hands and say, "You're impossible, Harold Grant," and mean it as a compliment. She's been gone 4 years now. I still wake at 5. The coffee is still made by 6. There's just no one left to call me impossible. That Monday morning was one of the mornings where the quiet sat heavier than usual. I sat at the small kitchen table in the house behind the shop, looking out through the window at the gravel lot where I used to line up cars waiting for inspection, and I opened the folder Danny had handed me the night before. I read the way I've always read contracts, slowly from the top, skipping nothing, because 41 years in this business taught me that the sentence that costs you the most is never the longest one. It's the shortest, gentlest one. The one written to be read quickly and agreed to without a second thought. The first 3 pages were all warm language: legacy, protection, peace of mind in your later years, the kind of language that sounds like love and works like a lease you can't get out of. Page 4 was where it turned into numbers. The house behind the shop, the one I was sitting in right now, listed as an asset to be transferred into the trust. My savings account at First Union. And at the very bottom of the list, one line written smoothly enough that it almost slipped past me before I caught it, and any and all other property owned by the grantor, individually or jointly, at the time of transfer. Everything, every dollar, every wrench in the shop, if it came to that. Page 7 named the trustees, the people who would have full control over anything placed inside the trust: Daniel Grant, Marcus Grant. Page 11 was where I had to stop and read the sentence 3 times before I let myself believe what it said. The grantor shall receive a monthly allowance, as determined at the sole discretion of the trustees, sufficient to cover reasonable living expenses. At the sole discretion of the trustees. No fixed number, no floor, no guarantee that whatever they decided to hand me each month would be enough to keep the lights on, let alone anything else. I had spent 41 years running my own shop, paying my own bills, signing my own name to every check that ever left my account. And here was a document, professionally typed, that proposed to turn me into a man waiting on an allowance from his own children. I set the folder down and pressed both palms flat against the table, the way I used to press my hands flat against a work order when a customer tried to talk me into cutting corners on a job I knew wasn't safe to cut corners on. I got up, poured a second cup of coffee, and let myself do the thing I don't usually let myself do. I ran the numbers in my head, not to feel sorry for myself, but because accuracy has always mattered to me, and I wasn't going to stop now, just because the numbers involved my own sons. Marcus's second year at community college, back when he decided he wanted to study automotive engineering properly, instead of just learning it from me. $22,000, paid in full, no strings attached. He told people he'd worked his way through it. I never corrected him. Danny's down payment on his house in 2015, $40,000. Written as a personal check, I told him he never had to pay back, because that's what fathers do. He told people he and Patty had saved aggressively for years. I didn't say a word. And March of 2020, when Danny's parts supply business nearly went under in the first weeks of the shutdown, and the bank was 3 weeks from calling the loan, $55,000 pulled from my own retirement account, wired straight into the business on a Thursday afternoon. Danny told his business partner it was an outside investor who'd stepped in at the last minute. $117,000. And I was the outside investor who never existed. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't angry about the money that morning. Not yet. I'd given every dollar of it freely, and when I gave it, there were no conditions attached. What sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't quite swallow was something else entirely. It was the story. The story my sons had built for themselves, brick by brick, in which their father was a background character at best, a man who showed up at birthdays and cookouts, and otherwise stayed quietly out of the way while they made themselves from nothing. The phone rang at 8:15. Marcus, cheerful as a morning radio host. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in, see if you had any questions about the paperwork. Call me back whenever." I stood at the counter and listened to his voice fill the kitchen, and I felt the particular ache of loving someone you're starting not to fully recognize. I let it go to voicemail. I walked back to the folder, flipped it closed, and set my hand flat on top of it again. Something in the back of my mind was already turning toward a different piece of paper entirely. A bank statement I hadn't thought twice about in weeks, sitting under a stack of mail on the counter. The kind of envelope that looks routine right up until the moment it isn't. Tuesday morning, something happened that I hadn't planned for at all, and looking back now, I think it was the moment the whole shape of things started to change. I still keep a landline in the house behind the shop. Ruth's number, really. The one she'd had installed the year we moved in, back when a phone on the wall still meant something. Almost nobody calls it anymore. So when it rang at 10 in the morning, I nearly let it go, assuming it was some recorded voice, trying to sell me an extended warranty on a car I didn't own. I picked it up anyway. A young woman's voice, a little rushed, reading off a script. "Good morning, this is First Union Bank. Can I confirm I'm speaking with Harold Grant? I'm calling regarding the reverse mortgage account on the property at 214 Route 9. "The what account?" I said. There was a short pause on her end, the kind of pause that tells you someone's eyes just moved across a screen a little faster than before. "I'm sorry, let me just verify. The reverse mortgage on 214 Route 9. Are you the property owner, Mr. Grant?" "I'm Harold Grant," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But this is the first I'm hearing about any reverse mortgage." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Grant, I think it might be best if you came into the branch to go over this in person. I'm not really in a position to discuss the details further over the phone." I thanked her, hung up the phone, and sat down at the kitchen table with both hands resting flat against the wood. 14 Route 9 was the shop. And the small house behind it, the one I was sitting in right that moment, was the same address. Somewhere, on paper, a loan had been taken out against the roof over my head, and I had never signed a single form for it, or at least, not knowingly. I've spent 41 years learning to trust my own hands over almost anything else. My hands weren't shaking, but something underneath my ribs had gone very still, the particular stillness that comes right before you understand something you're not going to be able to ununderstand. I called Ray Bassell. Ray and I go back to the early 70s, back when we both worked the service bay at a Chevrolet dealership 2 towns over, long before either of us had our own shop. Ray spent 25 years as an insurance claims adjuster before he retired, and if there's one thing that job leaves a man with, it's the habit of reading fine print like it's trying to hide something from him, because half the time it is. Ray doesn't call in the middle of the week unless something's pulled him off his routine, so I called him instead. "Ray," I said when he picked up, "I need to tell you about a phone call I just got." I laid it all out, the folder from Sunday, the trustee clause, the allowance with no floor, and now this call from a bank teller who thought she was confirming an appointment with a man who apparently already had a reverse mortgage sitting against his own front door. Ray was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had the same careful, measured tone he used to use reading me the small print on a claim settlement before he'd let a client sign anything. "Harold, listen to me. Don't sign a single piece of paper from this point forward. Not the trust, not anything else, until you know exactly what you're dealing with." He paused. "I know an attorney who handles exactly this kind of thing. Elder financial fraud, undue influence, all of it. Her name's Diane Foster. Sharp as they come, and she doesn't waste anybody's time, including yours. Let me call her." "I wasn't planning on signing anything," I said. "Not until I understand what's going on." "Good," Ray said. "Because, Harold, I need to say this plainly, and I need you to actually hear it. If there's a loan on that property you never signed for, that's not a misunderstanding. That's somebody's decision, and I don't think it was made by a stranger." I looked out the kitchen window at the gravel lot, at the shop sign I'd painted myself back in 1983, after I couldn't afford to have it made professionally. Harold's Auto, still standing, even if the name over the door didn't fully belong to me on paper anymore. "I know," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. "I'll set up a meeting with Diane," Ray said. "This week, if she can manage it. You shouldn't be sitting with this alone, Harold. Not for one more day." I thanked him and hung up. I sat at that table for a long while after, not moving, just listening to the quiet of the house. A quiet Ruth used to fill without even trying, and a quiet that had gotten heavier with every year since she'd been gone. I thought about the folder still sitting on the counter, about the reverse mortgage I hadn't known existed until 10 minutes ago, and about a hospital stay from a little over a year back that was starting to feel less and less like a coincidence the longer I sat with it. I remembered signing something during that stay. A stack of papers Lauren had brought by, told me it was routine, an update to the insurance paperwork for the shop, nothing more. I'd been on pain medication after my hip surgery, the kind that makes the edges of things go soft and hard to focus on. I signed where she pointed. I never thought twice about it again. Until now. Diane Foster's office sat on the third floor of an old building on Elm Street, the kind of place that smells like printer, toner, and older wood, and carries the particular seriousness of somewhere people go when they've run out of ways to solve a problem on their own. Ray had called her Sunday evening. She'd made room for us Wednesday morning at 8, before her regular appointment started, which told me something about how seriously she'd taken Ray's description of the situation. She was around 50, gray threading through dark hair pulled back neatly, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She shook my hand with a grip that meant business, and she didn't waste time with the kind of soft opening people use when they're about to deliver bad news. I've never needed that kind of cushioning. I appreciated that she seemed to sense it. "Ray gave me the broad strokes," she said, settling into her chair and opening a legal pad. "But I want to hear it from you, Mr. Grant. Start from the beginning." So I did. The Sunday meeting at Danny's house. The trust document with the allowance clause. The phone call from First Union about a reverse mortgage I'd never knowingly signed for. I told her about the hospital stay a little over a year ago, the paperwork Lauren had brought by, the way the medication had made my focus go soft right when it mattered most. Diane listened without interrupting, writing steadily. When I finished, she set her pen down and looked at me directly. "I requested the loan file from First Union as soon as Ray called me Monday. I also want a full credit report pulled in your name, and a copy of that trust document you mentioned." She paused. "Do you have any of the paperwork from your hospital stay still at home? Discharge forms, anything you signed during that period?" "I think so," I said. "I never throw anything out. Ruth used to tease me about it." "Bring everything you can find," she said. "Every page." I went home that afternoon and dug through the folder in my desk drawer where I keep everything medical, appointment cards, discharge instructions, insurance forms. Near the back, I found the stack Lauren had brought me during that hospital stay. Standard-looking pages, clean language, my signature on each one, in the shaky, careful hand of a man on pain medication trying to hold a pen steady. Nothing on the surface looked unusual, but I've learned over 41 years that a surface can hide almost anything if the person underneath it knows what they're doing. Diane called me back to her office the following Wednesday. 3 folders sat on her desk when I walked in, each one a different color, each one arranged with the kind of order that told me she'd been thinking about this since the moment she opened the first one. "I have 3 things to walk you through," she said, "and I want to be direct with you about all of them, because I think that's what you'd want." "Go ahead," I said. My hands were folded in my lap, and I could feel my own pulse in them. "First," she said, opening the loan file, "the reverse mortgage. $175,000, opened against 214 Route 9 in April of last year. That's the same month you had your hip surgery." She slid a copy of the signature page across the desk. "I had a handwriting expert compare this signature against verified samples of your own. The two don't match. Specifically, the letter H in your name, you write it with a long horizontal stroke, a habit going back to grade school. According to Ray, this signature doesn't have that stroke at all. The pressure pattern is also inconsistent with a natural signature. It shows signs of tracing." I looked down at the page, my name written by someone else's hand, wearing the shape of mine, but missing the one detail that had always made it actually mine. "Second," Diane continued, opening the next folder, "a credit card was opened in your name 14 months ago. Current balance, $31,000. The charges include a kitchen renovation billed to a contractor who lists Daniel Grant as the client of record, a beach vacation in Myrtle Beach this past June, and," she paused, watching me carefully before she said the next part, "a roof repair invoice for $12,400, billed to Marcus Grant's home address." I sat very still. "My third," she said, sliding the trust document toward me, the same one Danny had handed me across his dining room table. "If you sign this, every asset you own, including the house you're living in right now, transfers into a trust controlled entirely by Daniel and Marcus's trustees. You'd receive a monthly allowance determined at their sole discretion. No fixed minimum. No guarantee of any kind." I sat with all 3 folders in front of me and felt something I hadn't fully expected. Not surprise exactly. Some part of me had already started bracing for this the moment that bank teller called on Tuesday. What I felt instead was a slow, terrible clarity, the kind that arrives when something you'd been half seeing for a long time finally snaps all the way into focus. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "3 paths," Diane said, without hesitation, the way a woman speaks when she's already thought this through more than once. "We pursue this civilly, a lawsuit to recover the funds and clear your name from these accounts. We pursue it criminally, filing a formal report naming the individuals responsible for elder financial fraud and identity theft. Or we use the threat of criminal exposure to negotiate a private resolution without ever setting foot in a courtroom." She folded her hands on the desk. "Each path has a different timeline, a different cost, and a different outcome for your relationship with your sons going forward. That last part is something only you can weigh." I looked at the 3 folders lined up on her desk, a forged signature, a credit card I'd never asked for, and a document designed to turn me into a man living on whatever allowance 2 other people decided I deserved each month. "Give me a few days," I said. Diane nodded and capped her pen. "Take the time you need, but Mr. Grant, don't sign anything else in the meantime. Not for any reason." I want to tell you that walking out of that office, I felt only anger. That wouldn't be honest. What I felt more than anything was grief. the particular kind that comes from realizing the people you raised built an entire plan around the assumption that you'd never read past the first page. Before I go any further, tell me in the comments how old your grandchildren are, if you have them. I ask, because what happened that Saturday afternoon at a baseball diamond changed the way I understood everything that had come before it, and I don't think I'll ever watch a little league game the same way again. Tyler plays second base. He's 9, not the fastest kid on the field, but the one who always seems to know where the ball is going to end up before it gets there. Watching him play has always made me proud in a way that has nothing to do with winning. The way you're proud of a kid for a quality of mind, rather than an outcome. Westover Park on a Saturday morning in early fall is about as good as a place can get. Cool air, dew still sitting on the grass, parents lined up along the bleachers with their coffee thermoses. I got there early and found a spot at the top of the bleachers, far enough from the cluster of other parents to have some quiet, close enough to see Tyler's face when he made a good play. He spotted me during warm-ups and grinned the way 9-year-olds grin when they haven't yet learned to be self-conscious about being happy, and waved with his whole arm. I waved back. My chest felt full in a way it hadn't all week, not since the folder had landed on Danny's dining table. Danny hadn't come. Work call, Patty told me when I sat down, something that couldn't be helped. She was in jeans and a fleece vest, sunglasses pushed up on her head, looking every bit the part of a soccer mom turned baseball mom that she always managed to look. She sat 2 rows below me. We traded the usual pleasantries, the weather, Tyler's new cleats, whether the concession stand had opened yet, ordinary things, the kind of conversation that looks perfectly fine from the outside, even while 3 folders sat in a locked drawer in Diane Foster's office, with my name on all of them. The first half of the game was good. Tyler turned a clean double play in the second inning, and I was on my feet before I even realized it, one hand cupped around my mouth, shouting his name across the field. The parents around me laughed at how loud I was. I didn't care. A man doesn't get enough moments like that one, and I wasn't going to waste it worrying about paperwork. Between innings, the boys gathered around their coach on the far side of the field, and the parents stretched their legs and checked their phones. Patty stood up from the bleachers and walked to the far end of the row, the end I'd assumed was empty. She turned away from the field, toward the parking lot, and put her phone to her ear. I was reaching into my jacket for my own phone when the wind shifted. That's the only way I can explain it. The wind changed direction just enough to carry her voice back along the bleachers toward me. She was maybe 20 feet away, turned mostly sideways, speaking in the lowered voice people use when they think they're out of earshot. I didn't move. I kept my eyes on the field and I listened. The appraisal came back, 340, she said. A pause. Yeah, higher than we thought. Another pause longer. No, he hasn't signed yet, but he will. Diane already told them. She stopped herself corrected. The lawyer said once it's in the trust, we've got full control either way. Her voice dropped lower, more confident, more matter-of-fact, the voice of someone reporting progress on a project she'd been managing for a long time. Putting Tyler's name on the beneficiary line makes the whole thing look cleaner. Better for the tax side too. We just need him to sign before he talks to anyone else about it. Before he talks to anyone else about it. My hand closed around the edge of the metal bleacher seat and held on. The cold of it bit into my palm, and I let it. $340,000. My house. Ruth's kitchen window. The shop sign I'd painted myself in 1983. All of it reduced to a number in a phone call, discussed between innings of a 9-year-old's baseball game, like it was a line item on a spreadsheet. Tyler's name. They were using my grandson's name, a boy who didn't know the difference between a trust and a toy chest, to make a legal structure look cleaner on paper. And that boy was, at that exact moment, standing at second base on the other side of the field, adjusting his glove, completely unaware that his name had been written into a document he'd never been shown, for a purpose he would be ashamed of if he ever understood it. Patty finished her call, tucked her phone into her back pocket, and walked back to her seat without a word, settling in as though nothing at all had happened. I hadn't moved. I was still watching the field, my hand still gripping the bleacher, and I made myself breathe slowly through my nose until the shaking in my chest passed. The second half of the game was better than the first. Tyler got a clean hit down the third base line in the fifth inning and slid safely into second. And I stood and cheered with everything I had, and I meant every bit of it. A grandfather cheering for his grandson isn't a performance. It's one of the truest things there is, and the grief working through my chest underneath it didn't take 1 ounce away from how real that cheer was. After the final out, Tyler came running off the field, dirt on both knees, his whole heart on his face, and crashed into me with both arms. I caught him and held on a little longer than usual. "Did you see it, Grandpa? Did you see my slide?" "I saw everything," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to sound. Every bit of it. On the drive home, I called Diane from the truck. "Patty was on the phone at Tyler's game today," I said. "I heard her. 340,000, a property transfer, and Tyler's name on the beneficiary line to make it, in her words, look cleaner." My hands were tight on the wheel. "She said they need me to sign before I talk to anyone else." There was a pause on Diane's end, and when she spoke again, her voice was quiet and very certain. "Harold, come in tomorrow morning. There's something else I need to show you, and it can't wait any longer." I didn't go back to Diane's office the next morning like we'd planned. Instead, I called Danny and Marcus and asked both families to come for dinner Sunday evening at the small house behind the shop, where I still lived. My voice was as ordinary as it always was when I asked. I told them I was making the pork ribs, the ones Ruth used to say were the only thing I ever made that could compete with her own cooking. Dinner started the way it always did. Tyler talked without stopping about a science project involving baking soda and vinegar. Lauren brought an apple pie. Patty complimented the ribs twice, maybe out of habit, maybe because she genuinely meant it. For an hour, it was just a family having dinner, the way we'd done 100 Sundays before this one. When the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured, I set a thin folder on the kitchen table, the same table I'd built with my own hands back in 1990, the same table where I'd once taught both boys how to hold a socket wrench properly. "I want to ask you both a few things," I said, keeping my voice at the same temperature it had been all evening. Marcus glanced at the folder and gave a small, uncertain laugh. "What's that, Dad?" "The reverse mortgage," I said. $175,000, opened against this property back in April of last year, the same month I was in the hospital for my hip. I opened the folder to the signature page and set my finger beside the line. "This isn't my signature. I write my ish with a long stroke across the top. Have since grade school. This one doesn't have it." The room went quiet in a way I hadn't heard it go quiet in years. Danny looked at Marcus. Marcus looked down at the table. "Dad," Danny started, and something in his voice had already lost the confidence it usually carried. "I'm not asking to embarrass anyone," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm asking because I gave this folder to a lawyer 2 weeks ago, and the bank has already opened a formal investigation into that signature. I also know about the appraisal, $340,000. And I know Tyler's name was put on the beneficiary line of that trust to make the paperwork, and I'm quoting here, look cleaner." Patty went pale. Lauren pressed a hand over her mouth. Marcus was the first to break. Not a performance, not the kind of crying meant to be seen, the kind that comes when a person watches something they'd been holding together with both hands finally come apart in front of them. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, his voice cracking wide open. We just We figured it was going to be ours eventually anyway, so we thought. You thought you'd just take it a little early, I said, finishing the sentence he couldn't. Is that it? Nobody answered. The silence was the answer. I'm not going to take you to court, I said after a long moment. But there are 3 things I need. I looked at both of them in turn. First, you work directly with my attorney to repay the loan and the credit card balance in full, on the bank's timeline, not yours. Second, Tyler's name comes off every piece of paperwork involving my property. He's 9 years old. He doesn't belong in the middle of this, and he never should have been put there. Third, I looked at both my sons, and I let my voice drop lower. From now on, any paperwork involving me, I read myself, and I decide myself. Nobody brings me anything to sign while I'm in pain or on medication or too tired to argue. Not ever again. Danny nodded, unable to say anything at all. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand, his own hand shaking. Dad, we're going to fix this. I hope so, I said, but fixing it isn't something you say. It's something you do over time. Patty spoke for the first time since the folder had come out, her voice small in a way I'd never heard from her before. Harold, she stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. Some sentences, I've noticed, are better left unfinished than finished badly. Tyler wandered in from the living room right about then, oblivious to everything that had just happened, holding up a half-built Lego model. Grandpa, can you help me with this piece? It won't click in right. I looked at that boy, standing in the middle of a kitchen where his name had just been spoken as evidence of something he hadn't even known existed, and I felt the anger in my chest soften into something else entirely, something closer to resolve than to rage. Sure, buddy, I said, my voice steady again. Bring it here. I spent the next 20 minutes at the counter with Tyler, working a stubborn Lego piece into place while, behind us, the rest of the table sat in a silence that had nothing performed about it anymore. When Danny and Marcus finally got up to leave, Marcus hugged me at the door longer than he usually did, and said, quiet enough that only I could hear it, I know this is going to take a long time to fix. I just want you to know I understand that now. I nodded. I didn't tell him it was going to be easy, because it wasn't, and I've never been a man who says things he doesn't mean just to make a room feel better. After they left, I stood at the kitchen window and watched both cars pull out of the gravel lot and turn onto Route 9, taillights disappearing into the dark. I thought about the folder still sitting open on the table behind me, about the forged H, about the number 340,000, about a boy building a spaceship out of plastic bricks in the next room without knowing any of it. 3 months later, the reverse mortgage was fully discharged. The credit card balance was paid off down to the last dollar, on the timeline the bank required, not the timeline that would have been convenient for anyone else. Tyler's name no longer appeared on a single piece of paperwork he'd never been shown, and never would have understood. I sat down with Diane one more time and rewrote my will properly. The house and the shop stay mine for as long as I'm living in them, and after that, everything moves into an independent trust that Diane's office administers, not my son's. A portion goes to Tyler when he turns 25. A portion goes toward a scholarship fund for the automotive trades program at the night school, where I earned my own certification decades ago, back when I was younger than either of my boys are now. I didn't cut Danny and Marcus out of my life. I want to be honest about that, because I know some people expect a story like this to end with doors slammed shut for good, and that's not what happened here, and I don't think it needed to. We still have dinner together most Sundays, but something about those dinners is different now, quieter in a good way, less performed. Marcus is more careful with his words than he used to be, and I've noticed he doesn't finish sentences the way he used to, the confident kind of sentence that assumes it already has your agreement before it's even done. Danny comes by the shop sometimes on a Saturday morning, just to sit on the old stool, by the workbench and talk, the way he used to when he was a boy, who thought helping meant being close by more than actually doing anything useful. One evening, walking me out to my truck after dinner, Marcus said something I've held on to since. "I know I haven't earned your trust back yet, Dad. I just want you to know I'm not expecting you to hand it to me. I'm trying to earn it, slow, the right way." I didn't make him any promises that night. I just nodded and told him, "Then keep doing that. Don't talk about it. Just do it." Most Saturday mornings, I still open the shop at 7, the way I have for 41 years. Even though these days I only take on small jobs for neighbors I've known a long time, an oil change, a stubborn alternator, the occasional brake job for someone who remembers when I used to charge half of what the dealership across town charges now. Tyler comes by most afternoons after school lets out, before his baseball practice starts. He sits on the same stool his father used to sit on, asking me questions about torque and compression and why some engines knock when they're cold, and he has no idea at all about the folder that used to have his name written into it. I think that's exactly how it should stay for him. Some weights aren't a 9-year-old's to carry, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as it's within my power to do so. If there's one thing I want people to take from this, it's this. Loving someone quietly doesn't mean accepting being taken advantage of quietly. Those two things are not the same, no matter how many times someone tells you they are. You can forgive a person and still hold them to the truth of what they did. Those two things can live in the same room together. I've learned that they have to, if you want any kind of real peace on the other side of something like this. I spent 41 years fixing engines, and if there's one thing that work taught me, it's that a machine never breaks down without a reason, and the reason is always somewhere underneath the hood, waiting for someone patient enough to go looking for it. I didn't expect, at 76 years old, to learn that the same rule applies to people. That sometimes the thing that most needs checking under the hood isn't an engine at all. It's trust. And trust, like anything mechanical, doesn't fail all at once. It wears down slowly, one small overlooked part at a time, until the day it finally gives out completely, unless somebody's paying close enough attention to catch it first. If you've seen any part of yourself in this story, don't wait as long as I did to start paying attention. The people who only love you for what you carry will set you down the moment the weight becomes inconvenient for them. The ones who love you for exactly who you are will still be standing there when you finally put that weight down yourself. That's what family justice looked like for me at 76. Not shouting, not a courtroom, just an old man who finally sat down and read the fine print before he picked up the pen. If this story reached you somewhere real, leave a comment below and let me know. Have you ever been the one who quietly carried more than anyone realized? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. The next story is already waiting. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. It means more than you know. One last thing before I go. The stories on this channel contain fictional elements, shaped for the purpose of storytelling and reflection. They are not real accounts. If this kind of content isn't for you, no hard feelings at all. Go find something that serves you better.